How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good. Everything all set?
I'm having one of these weird evenings where it's actually much darker in this house than it would seem to be. And I'm going to have to, I'm blurring my background again because yesterday Liz made me unblur my background. So I'm blurring it back again. So because
Some of
it's,
those books. Oh,
Fine, David. Fine. Just go do that.
Hey, Christian, there it is. There's the little button. You shouldn't have told me how to do it. That's, that's on you. All right. We're going to we started just a little bit late, so we're going to go ahead and kind of jump in here. And I want to welcome everybody to the Kimbilio Reading Series. It's one of the things that it's just such a great pleasure to do. And we do these as often as we can. Whenever our some of our fellows have new books to come out, fellows and faculty, and we also are privileged now and then to be able to offer a in-person reading series here in St. Louis, which is where I am. And that is entirely dependent on the schedule of the St. Louis County Public Library and or our wonderful local bookseller partner, which is Left Bank Books in St. Louis, who has been a really strong and solid supporter of Kimbilio and our authors. For those of you who don't have a beloved local bookstore, we encourage you to, um, oh, this is reminding me that I turned my camera off when I'm blurring. That was dumb. For
I'll
those of
stop.
you
I'll
that
stop nagging now.
Oh, keep nagging. I love it. For those of you that don't have a beloved bookstore, just a reminder that all of our Cambilio Fellows books recently and otherwise are available for purchase on our Cambilio Bookshop site. And Nuha will place the link for that in the chat. Um, I also want to thank Nuha Faria, who is our administrative manager here at Kimbilio, who has done such an amazing job organizing and putting this reading together and all of our other reading series. And those of you who have had the pleasure of working with her in this context and others know how terrific she is. It makes my life both enormously easier and also incredibly difficult because she's so efficient. That means I have to actually wake up and do work every day. Um, so my name is David Haynes. I am the board chair of Kimbilio, and we are an organization now celebrating somewhere around in the neighborhood of our 14th anniversary. We were founded at SMU in Dallas, Texas, where I was on the faculty for 20 years, and SMU continues to be a strong partner for our work and for everything that we do. Kimbilio means safe haven in Swahili. We support the creation, study, and preservation of literature by voices from across the African diaspora. Projects include readings, presentations at professional conferences, social media, networking, book prizes, and an annual summer retreat for fiction writers who are members of the Kimbilio community. And we're really excited. We're actually moving into retreat season right now. And in about 8 weeks, myself and four of my colleagues will be happy to welcome, I believe at this point, 33 fellows to the Wild Acres Retreat Center in North Carolina. It's going to be a great week, a beautiful week, and it's always the highlight of my year. And I guess I want to just say one other thing before we get started today, because I just can't help but brag about this because it's such an important achievement for Kimbilio. Kimbilio is one of, I believe it's 40 organizations that were selected to be inaugural recipients of the Literary Arts Fund grant. It was an extraordinarily competitive process, and that is validation for the terrific work that we do as an organization, that our writers do, and that everyone that does that has supported the organization has made happen. And we are in very prestigious company as part of that grant cohort. And we're a lot of onlys. Like I think we're the only organization in the state of Missouri that was given a grant. We're one of few peer organizations that got a grant like the one that we received. So we're just going to be bragging up that left and right, and everybody needs to know. But now I'm going to move into the main portion of our evening's program, which is to welcome Jennifer Maritza McCauley and Nikesha Elise Williams to our online reading series. I'm going to introduce Jennifer first, and she'll read for a little bit. Then I'll introduce Nikesha, and she'll read it a little bit. And please save up your questions and comments for the end. But please, please, please make use of your react buttons at the bottom of the screen. We can kind of see them, and I think our readers may or may not be able to see the love floating by as you listen to their terrific work. Jennifer Maritza McCauley is the author of the cross-genre collection Scar On, Scar Off, the short story collection When Trying to Return Home, which we were pleased to be able to host for one of her readings for that publication here in St. Louis in person, and Recognition, which is and Recognition, which is coming out from the University of Wisconsin Press, and a poetry collection, Kinds of Grace. There's so many things here, but the speculative fiction collection that we're going to talk about tonight is Neon Steel, coming from Cornerstone Press. She is a recipient of fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts. That was my sigh of loss for the National Endowment for the Arts. Kimbilio, Canto Mundo, and Sundress Academy for the Arts. Her poetry collection, Scar On, Scar Off, received an Independent Publishers Book Award, and her story collection, When Trying to Return Home, was a New York Times Editor's Choice and one of the best fiction books of the year by Kirkus Reviews. She has an MFA from Florida International, a PhD from the University of Missouri Columbia, and she is presently an assistant professor in English at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. Please welcome Jennifer Maritza McCauley.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh. Thanks y'all for coming. And I'm recovering from a little bit of a sickness, so if my voice is not that great, that's why. But thank you so much for spending your night with us. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much to everyone here. Okay. So the first piece I'm going to read is from an upcoming poetry collection. It's very short, but I want to start off with a little bit of poetry. Or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of hybrid-y. Okay. So it's called Power. I'll tell you the best Bible story. Yo, my version is favorite, but you can check the original if you want. So Jesus is getting really big at this point. He's just blowing up. Folks are following him and he's marching on. Disciples are striding and streaking next to him. You know, Jesus always rides 12 people deep. This woman sees Jesus, freaks out, and she's like, Jesus, OMG, OMG. So then she grabs for him and catches him. This uncatchable man. He stops, shivers. He turns around and says, I felt a little bit of my power leak out of me. He literally says this in the traditional translation. Or properly, someone touched me because I felt power going out from me. Anyway, she begs for a healing and he agrees and everything works out. But yo, seriously, isn't that crazy that this every woman touched him sucked the power from a god? He didn't prevent it from happening. It had to be a woman. It had to weaken the saving man, to make him forget his pals and his mission. He stopped. He stopped for that moment. In that moment, he was disoriented. It had to be a woman. So that's how we're starting off. Okay. So I am going to read from Neon Steel. And this is a story. This collection is, if anyone likes anime or you don't like anime, there's a lot of anime in here. So it's a little bit of a tribute to anime, but it's also kind of about how young people form their own little tribes, how they form groups of folks that will understand them. and how also, groups that are not seen by the city of Pittsburgh, they make themselves seen throughout the book. So, anyways, if you don't know anything about anime, Afro Otaku is the first piece I'm going to read, and otaku is just a very obsessive fan of something. In this case, it's anime. Um, so this is just a little bit of that story. Afro Otaku. I hadn't been back to the mills, a brown, flushed, abandoned mall atop the crooked elbow of Blawnock's Mountain, since I'd graduated from high school. My gap year after my time at Fox Chapel had largely been a bust. I'd been to college for a semester, dropped out, worked a few odd jobs, then ran out of money after the Oakmont caregiving company I worked for went under. I moved back home with my parents and eventually enrolled in the University of Pittsburgh. Since I lived with my parents, my friends were few. I tried starting up conversations in class, but the students largely stuck in friend clusters and stayed to themselves. My first month in school was fine. I studied, I answered questions, I returned home. Nothing large nor grandiose to report. I had one girlfriend who moved away, one pen pal, and some online friends. I never had a boyfriend, though I dreamed of the experience. I read shoujo mangas every night and imagined my own Yu Matsura would come and enliven my insipid days at Pitt. He didn't, and I was vastly lonely. My parents constantly fought at home. My mother even threatened to go back to Puerto Rico. I couldn't concentrate on my schoolwork, so I had to spend my days at Lorien West, gobbling up fictional worlds and comic book panels. I was a solitary nerd. My high school friends, fellow social outcasts, had gone to various other colleges, and I was the only one left in Pittsburgh. Anyways, one day on campus, I saw a poster for Anime World, a new store opening up at the Mills. It was about 10 minutes away from me in O'Hare, where my parents lived. I nearly salivated thinking about the new issues of manga I would buy and how convenient the place was to me. I borrowed my mommy's tow up Subaru and drove up to the Mills, excited for the little snatch of escapism within my grasp. When I entered the once flourishing mall, I was immediately taken by its emptiness. A rush of dead air struck me when I walked through the sliding doors. There was the Borders that used to be thriving, and a Walden Books that used to compete with the Borders, and there was the Rue 21 and Macy's and J.C. Penney's, all flashing staples of commercialism, now whisked away. The only stores remaining were mom and pop places, the arcade, a Christmas shop that stayed open all year, and a place that sold terrifying baby dolls. And now, Anime World. I'll stop there, but what's really going to end up happening is that he's going to find her tribe, and then someone's going to start using fireballs to blow someone up. And that is true. That actually happens in the story. So, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's an amazing evocation of a dying mall. Particularly the shock of when you walk into one that you haven't been in a while, and you sort of have this memory in your head of this kind of thriving place that's full of people, and then suddenly you realize that there's nothing there, and there's also no one there.
Yeah.
And so this is a space on a real mall.
Oh yeah, it's definitely based on a real mall. And I didn't even change the name. So I was in Pittsburgh and I read it. I was like, I know that I'm throwing a shot at the Pittsburgh Mouse and I don't care. Um, but yeah, it is. Yeah, and a lot of antics happen in the mall and things like that. So yeah, I find dying malls really fascinating.
Yeah, aren't they though? I mean, and particularly when it's some like those Mills malls were when they were at their heyday, they were so busy and thriving,
Yes.
and sort of the place to go. And in some ways, they're more dispiriting than your generic mall. Have you been to this? This is sort of gives you the sense of how my brain works. And some of you are unfortunate enough to know that. Have you been to the Dead Mall website?
No, I've not.
Oh,
Okay, that's what I'm gonna spend all my evening time
you
doing.
must go down that rabbit hole. And it's a guy who's basically compiles evidence and particularly photo evidence of all the dying malls in America. And and it's sort of, and then it has yeah, there's the all the ones that have already passed. And then there's the watch list. These ones, the last anchor story has, the pennies is closed. So this one is at long
Watch
for a
that.
life. And it's Dallas was a hotbed of dead malls. I just what a stupid sentence, but it actually was. There were dead malls everywhere surrounding Dallas that were built in the heyday of mall culture, which was, sort of they started building them all in the 70s.
Yeah.
And there they all, and now that particularly those that are in those first ring suburbs are all just abandoned. And so you have these, I know that's also true in Houston. Houston also is sort of just
Oh yeah, it's
ringed
awesome.
by dead malls, as you know. And there'll just be these big empty parking lots everywhere. Talk about a little bit about the anime part of this, just to give us a little bit of your sense of that, your
Yeah.
love for it, and et cetera.
Yes. So I started writing fan fiction. That was my foray into writing at all. It was Sailor Moon fan fiction when I was 13, and I had a little website called Planet Senshi, and I would review different animes, and then I'd make parodies of different animes, and I'd write fiction pieces about, Sailor Moon and things like that. And I had a little following at one point when I was 13 or 14. People came to my website. I was so excited. I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to write new stories." But then this terrible troll who was, and mind you, I was 13 or 14 years old. This guy was in his like mid 40s, came onto my website and started writing these very nasty things and then all this stuff. So I was demoralized, so I took it down. Anyways, that's how I started writing. um, but I started writing fan fiction about anime. I loved anime. Sailor Moon was my gateway drug into anime because it was a group of young women who were empowered, who had each had their own power, and they just took down monsters, and it just felt really wonderful to just watch them, have that sort of freedom. So I adored that, and then I got into the ladies manga. They call it the shoujo manga for ladies. I loved it. I didn't care. I'm sure a lot of people would not think it was good, but I loved it. And there's a lot of really wonderful pieces like Fruits Basket. I think that's a great one. But there's a lot of really, quality stories. And I learned a lot about storytelling from watching how anime kind of unfolds. Um, so I thought I wanted to take that structure for this book and put it on a piece that was kind of a tribute, and also kind of an exploration of kind of, finding your tribe in in a city that's kind of, post-industrial, industrial at the same time, and kind of a liminal space. So that's
Mhm.
what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, there's something compatible about, sort of your Rust Belt kind of cities and the whole kind of anime culture. I know that's sort of counterintuitive, but in some ways it sort of fits better there than it does maybe in your kind of contemporary everything's up to date, perfect sidewalks and landscaping kind of environments, that you really want to it kind of maybe it fits the dystopian piece of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of fell into my lap. And after I started, writing those pieces, I was just like, okay, because there's a sort of about a robot in the middle of Pittsburgh and dystopian Pittsburgh. So, you know, I, I I just kind of played around with my city in a way that I should reframe it because I didn't like it at first. I didn't like Pittsburgh, and then I came to love it later. So,
There it is now, part of the Pittsburgh canon, which that folks who aren't from Pittsburgh probably don't know that there. I'm sure there is a Pittsburgh canon other than
yeah,
Michael Chabon's The Mysteries of Pittsburgh.
that there are other folks. It's not just
So we'll come back and have some more conversation with you after we listen to Nikesha. I do want to say that there is a link to the Dead Malls website in the chat, which of course was provided by Tara Campbell, who would know about the Dead Malls website. And so don't go there now, but go there later and be prepared to dig deep because I got to tell you, it is so you just go right, you get sucked right into it. And but anyway, let's thank Jennifer for her terrific presentation. And thank you, Jennifer. And we'll talk a little bit more in a minute. And so now I'm going to introduce Nikesha Elise Williams. And I want to also say everybody needs to go to Nikesha Elise Williams' website so they can see. Nikesha Elise Williams is a two-time Emmy award-winning producer and award-winning author. And you can go to her website, you can see those beautiful Emmys on display. And producer and host of the Black and Published podcast, which is an amazing podcast. A narrative strategist by day and a journalist always, her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, The Bitter Southerner, Essence, and Vox. Nikesha's work has been supported by Kimbilio, the DeGroote Foundation, and the Tin House Summer Workshop. A Chicago native, she lives in Florida with her family. And one of the things that she'll be discovering as you listen to this novel, and also as you sort of look into the novel, is that it is a book that is finding its way onto many lists this year as one of the year's premier pieces of historical fiction. And we know, so those of you that are fans of historical fiction are in for a retreat. So here's Nikesha.
Thank you. Don't mind my co-host right now or my co-reader. I'm going to read from the beginning and the prologue and a little from chapter 1. Prologue. They cut off her head because she ran, but who could know? Certainly not Tati. She was looking for her daddy. Her mama, Nadia, wouldn't tell her. Gladys, her Mimi, wouldn't tell her either. So she searched for him. She didn't know to search for anyone else. It wasn't like there was a burial or body, no coffin, no cemetery. But in a way, she found her. In fact, she found them all, including her daddy. In the kitchen table whisperings and the basement murmurings, where her mother used a hot comb to press out her hair every Saturday night. Part 1, questions. March 1995. The noxious scent of burnt hair and relaxer cold-cocked Tati with a closed fist stopped, singeing her nose hairs as she made her way into the basement. A yellow neon sign that read Nadia's Nubian Salon hung on the wall of the landing, led the way for customers who entered through the back door. Not that Mimi ever came that way. She insisted on coming through the front. As soon as she crossed the threshold, her eyes roamed as her gloved hands swiped across furniture that was neither dusted nor polished, and her feet traversed the floor that wasn't mopped. For the unwashed dishes in the sink, she shook her head and kissed her teeth. Behind the heavy basement door, Mary J. Blige's My Life album provided the soundtrack for the Sunday morning appointment. Nadia sang along in her own version of praise and worship. She didn't abide no gospel, and since all the R&B stations got holy from 7 to noon, Nadia was her own DJ, despite Mimi's misgivings. The elder woman never said anything. The only indication of her displeasure was to turn corners of her lips, which made her face look as if she were sucking on something sour. She knew that if she wanted to get her hair done, music was Nadia's non-negotiable, especially Mary. It was Nadia's third copy of the CD. She had played the other two out so much they skipped. At least that's what she said. But Tati knew dropping hair grease, spritz, and holding spray on the disc didn't help the scratches none either. Tati retrieved the broom hidden behind the sliding gray door that separated the laundry room from the rest of the salon and swept the perimeter. She moved between the 2 wash bowls along the right wall and the 3 dryers on the left before she treaded through the middle where Mimi was enthroned in the client chair. The curling iron hissed in Nadia's hand. All of her soft Sheen and Dudley's products, along with rollers, curlers, and irons of different widths, were in arm's reach on shelves that butted up against the basement wall, below a second flickering yellow Nadia's Nubian Salon sign. Tati, stop standing there like a dazed deer and help me, Nadia snapped. What you want me to do? Damn it, Tati, help. Finish sweeping, clean out the wash bowl, pick up Mimi's towel that fell to the ground and put it in the basket. I know your eyes good because we just got them checked. You need to put them to use and earn your keep after all the money I'm spending on you for your little birthday. Nadia, that's not right, Mimi said. What you mean that's not right? Nadia asked, exasperated. Yesterday, we did the movies and dinner at the Cheesecake Factory with Toya and Desiree on top of shopping at the Water Tower place. And she sprung her class trip on me at the last minute. Shit, I had to give her a post-dated check. She lucky I don't make her little ass go get a work permit to bag groceries at Jewel's. Earning her keep is the least she could do. Ain't that what you told me when I was little? I told you a lot of things when you was little. It don't mean I was right. It worked for me. I turned out all right. And we want Tati to be better than all right. Mimi turned in her seat and glared at Nadia, who only rolled her eyes and clicked the curlers. A direction and a threat. Turn around before you get burned. Mimi huffed and faced forward. Tati, where's Desiree anyway? Nadia asked. Upstairs sleeping. She spent the night? Mimi asked. First time since we were 5, Tati answered excitedly. And she's still asleep while you working with your mom. Tati shrugged. Desiree had been her best friend for years, and she'd never known her to be a morning person. She was always late, and they were bused to school. The mornings Desiree didn't miss the bus completely, the driver waited on the corner at 65th and Green for her to come out. Sometimes the driver would even go around the block and pull up to Desiree's front door after Tati had pointed it out and beat the horn to encourage her to hurry up. Sometimes she made it, sometimes she didn't. When Nadia had yelled up the stairs for Tati to come help, Desiree didn't move and Tati didn't make her. She secretly hoped she could get through Mimi's appointment with Desiree being none the wiser. Mimi asked, Tati, how old you is now? 14, she answered. Your mama told me you got your first monthly yesterday. Dang, Mom. Ain't no secrets in this house, Nadia said. Oh, yeah, there are. But that's what you get for running around with a married man. And I'll stop there. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, that was fabulous. Look at all the hearts and all the applause going by. Here's a so here's here, please give us because a lot of folks here maybe are new to the book and haven't read all the wonderful publicity and also wonderful reviews it's received. So give people a little bit of overview of where the story's going and both setting, time period, and such all such as that.
Okay, so yeah, I should have done the elevator pitch before I started reading, my bad. The Seven Daughters of DUPREE is a historical fiction novel that's told backwards in time from 1995 to 1860 about the secrets kept between mothers and daughters over the course of 7 generations. So the section that I read from the prologue and then apart from chapter 1, kind of the first line in the prologue, that's a paragraph, sets the scene. Like, you know exactly where we're going from that first line. They cut off her head because she ran. We're going to enslavement and we're going to come, but we don't start there. What I wanted to do with this novel was tell the story of this family backwards, start with the present generation. And then the book is not linear. So I jump time period. So like after chapter 1 opens in 95, you go to 1870. And I'm really putting the story together between each daughter's perspective and covering a lot of ground between contemporary Chicago, 1990 Chicago, and then antebellum and Jim Crow, the South. I created a fictional town of Lansing, Alabama, loosely based on Mobile and Africatown, as well as where I live here in Jacksonville, Florida, and American Beach. I kind of fused all those places together into this one fictional place to go back that far and kind of tell the story of this family.
So you're also, because you're dealing with the antebellum South, and then and in composite form, you're also dealing with the migration, how these families got, or this family got from the South post emancipation
Mhm.
to the industrial North. And so, I mean, you've got a lot of historical periods to cover here, and a lot of moving parts. I'm always interested when I talk to historical novelists to hear a little bit about the research journey. So tell us a little bit about that.
There wasn't really a whole lot of research like that was new. Um, a lot of it, like the historical portions of the story that are set in the fictional town of Land's End, I drew a lot of that from where I live here in Jacksonville, and it's connected to Jacksonville history as well as history of a county just north of us, Nassau County, where American Beach is. And so here in Jacksonville, there is a plantation, Kingsley Plantation, that's a historic site. It's preserved, it's still standing. And the story there is that the proprietor was actually a woman named Anna Kingsley, who was kidnapped from Senegal in the late 1790s. She went from Senegal to Cuba. Cuba is where the enslaver Zephaniah Kingsley bought her and then brought her to Fort George Island in where it is in Jacksonville. She was 13 when she was kidnapped. When she arrived in Florida, she was pregnant. She had 4 children for him. She was acknowledged as his wife, even though he was married to a white woman. He eventually emancipated her. She emancipated their children and other members of their family. And then she ran that land. And during the Civil War, it was used as kind of a safe haven for anyone who was escaping enslavement in Florida. And so the site is still standing. The house, the barn, the stables, the kitchen, and the quarters. It's still standing. It's very well preserved. And they do like a celebration there every year during Black History Month. But Anna Kingsley's great-granddaughter, Mary Sammis, she married Florida's first Black millionaire, a man named Abraham Lincoln Lewis, who with his business partners in about 1935, they ran a life insurance company called the Afro-American Mutual Aid Company, Life Insurance and Mutual Aid Company. But in 1935, they bought 200 acres of land just north of Jacksonville, and they called it American Beach. And from 1935 to about 1964, when Hurricane Dora came through, Black people would go to American Beach like Black people go to the Vineyard now. Mm-hmm. It was like the spot. Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston spent time there. Ray Charles and James Brown performed there. Hank Aaron used to go there. So it was like a big thing to do. And so when you read the novel and you see the fabric of Land's End, it's a lot of that history that I'm pulling from, like the DUPREE family. They have about 200 acres of land, and they have their own beach, and they're kind of the proprietors on the Black side of town in their community. And then the reason why I wanted to set it in Alabama, though, was because around the time that in 2019 was when the Clotilda slave ship was found, I believe in the Mobile or the Alabama River.
The Bay, yeah.
Yeah, right there after it had, and we know that was one of the last ships to come in with 120 enslaved people, but they were still living, so their stories were still told. And so I cannot help you right now, baby. I'm so sorry. I don't know where the iPad is either. You have to wait. And so they came in, and so their stories are still told. That's how we got Barracoon from Zora Neale Hurston and all the works from the WPA. And so I was obsessed with that story when they found the ship. I listened to all the podcasts, got all the books, and just really followed it. So that's why I wanted to set it in Alabama and kind of drawing on all that history, but not be beholden to the story of Mobile or the story of Africatown. I wanted to do something different on the page. And so that's why I fictionalized the community.
The reverse chronology, of course, gives you the opportunity to do a couple of different things. One is to, of course, I was going to say, if you do a forward chronology, you would be looking at how things progress forward from one generation to the other. Going backwards, you're of course looking at what informed the characters that came that you've already read about. What other things what did you learn as a writer from doing the reverse chronology, and also what drew you to writing in that form?
Writing in that form, I think, happened accidentally. Initially, when I conceived of the story, it was going to be a very simple story about a girl who didn't know her father, and then in the end, she finds him. And technically, that still happens, right? But a whole lot of other stuff happens in between. And so I started trying to write that story. And my intent when I first sat down to write was to just follow it all from Tatiana's point of view from 14 to 19 years old. But it was unsustainable. She for me was unsustainable as a character to take her that far. Like, I got bored with her because she wasn't doing enough. And so I wrote several of her chapters, and then I stopped at the same stopping point where part 1 ends now, where she ends up learning her father's name, but she still hasn't met him. I stopped there, and then I jumped into her mother's perspective. And then I wrote several chapters of her mother's perspective. And then I picked Tatiana back up at 19 and concluded this first draft. And so I started going backwards. And when I finished the first draft, the grandmother character, Gladys, she was lingering with me. There was something that she says, which is still in the final copy, but something she said in the first draft as well, around like, what do you think happens to light-skinned women in the South? And I remember writing the line and writing past it, and it didn't do anything for me. But like after I finished the first draft, it was lingering, and I was like, well, what happened to Gladys, friend? And so I had to become the journalist for the novel. And, I had this vision of this woman walking down this dirt road in this white dress. And so I knew it was Gladys. And then the vision got a little wider and I saw what was behind her. And so I was like, okay, that's good. I don't know what we're doing here, but okay, we've got something. But it didn't really click into place until I found that first line. And the way that happened was I was listening to another Kimby, Disha Philia, on a podcast talking about this workshop that she teaches about writing your best first line. And I then asked myself, well, what would my best first line be? And that's when it came to me. They cut off her head because she ran. So I went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 generations, but it's a big gap between Gladys and the enslaved ancestor. And so then my mind went to church, that 7 being the number of completion. So I was like, I'll do 7 generations. And then I just had to fill in the gaps. And so I started to ask, what are your names? What are your issues? What are your turning points? All of these different things. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, I don't want to write an entire novel of just these extra characters and then put it together with the first. So I thought of them like short stories. So I was like, well, I'll do like 7 chapters for each woman. And that didn't end up happening, but I continued in the format where I had already started, where I had written Tati and then I had written Nadia. So then I just picked up and I wrote Gladys, and then I wrote Ruby, and then I wrote Juby, and then I wrote Emma, and then I wrote the enslaved ancestor. And then I put them all together. And in the construction of the novel, I was inspired by my mother, who's very much into genealogy and has like really been looking for our family roots since the original roots came out in 1970. And so I've seen her have starts and stops and the gaps in the research. And so I was like, I love historical fiction, but so many of the books I read take you from the top to the bottom, from the 1600s all the way to the 2020 now. And that's not really how we're finding out about our history anymore. And so I wanted to echo that in the construction of the book and have these big time jumps between the generations, but then also put them together with the parallels between the women. What are the same cycles that they're repeating? Maybe not the same generation 1 to 1, but maybe like 1 to 3. And that's really how it came together.
It's amazing. And I'm sure all the fiction folks who are listening, and also the poets, will appreciate how books teach us to write them. And we sort of discover our way into them, and then we think we're doing one thing, and then the book says, "No, we've got some other things over here that need to happen." Um, I want to let's pin Jennifer onto the screen here, and then we're going to have a little group discussion and get some questions from our audience, and some questions. One question is already here, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but. I think this is a different take on the question, which is how do you how do you decide what to write about and what point of view to tell your stories? And so I think we've already heard a little bit about about where these stories came from, but I am obsessed with point of view. It's a thing that sort of drives me and drives my work. So maybe talk a little bit, each of you talk a little bit about how you found the perspective or perspectives, plural, for telling your story. You talked a little bit about that, Nikesha, but I'll start with Jennifer, and then we'll come back to you, Nikesha. So how did you find the voice and the point of view for your book?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah, for Neon Steel, I started in the first person. The first piece I wrote was called Smoke Break, about a group of young people in Pittsburgh who, one of them is a smoker, and they all kind of hang out on the porch with him. And that was the first story that I did from the first person point of view. And then the first story I did from the third person point of view was about a robot who is in downtown Pittsburgh. So the book is a little bit wild, but as a robot from downtown Pittsburgh who's trying to hunt down her family's murderer. So various things, kind of happen in the book. But I think that when it came to which POV I was choosing, it was really which story do I want to tell. So I knew that for the robot story, it's called Neon Steel. I wanted there to be a little bit more distance, so I picked this third person attached than I would if I was in first person. So I think that this modicum of distance really allowed me to kind of capture the sort of coldness that this character is dealing with. Whereas the first person, which I did for the most of the book, um, that just and actually I use third person to story about vampires. So there's vampires and robots, y'all. Anyways, so yeah, so the first person I was kind of mimicking autofiction in a way sometimes. And I also wanted you to be just as close as physically possible to the narrator. I wanted you to kind of feel their happiness and their pain. And also, since I model a lot of this book on anime and shoujo manga, you're very, very, very close to the protagonist, almost too close to the protagonist, where the thought bubbles will be inside of that character's kind of way of speaking. So it's cool. But I try to mimic that in the book as well. So that's how I went about POV.
Are the character rules different if your narrator is a robot?
That's a really good question. So, it's a kind of a hybrid robot. So there's humanoid qualities to the robot. So kind of, sort of, you know. But I don't know if there's like specific rules on how to create a robot. I feel like that's the piece, how to create a robot or how to write about robots. It's great. David, thank you.
Nikesha, anything you want to add to the perspective question? Because you talked a little bit about finding each of the generations.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, the first draft I wrote completely in first person. So from Tati and Nadia's point of view, we're completely in first person. But when I realized that I was going to be doing a generational story, all of the other women's stories, what I wrote them as just individual stories before I put them together, I wrote in third and a close third. Just because I knew I was going to be jumping time and I wanted to be able to move around. First person for me can be limiting in being able to move the characters and get out of like different scenes and scenarios. Like I don't want to follow them through like the mundanity of their lives. I need to like jump. And so third person allowed me to do that, but keeping it at a close third so that their voices are very clear and distinct was very important for this novel. So yeah, that's what I did. And so when I combined everything, I had to change everything from Tati and Nadia's chapters into third person, and then I just kept going with the other women that I'd already written that way, just so that it would be cohesive throughout the novel.
Here's another question for you from Camille, which is about secrets and secrets as being a potential narrative engine. So when did you discover? When did you become aware that secrets were going to be at the heart of the storytelling, an essential part of the storytelling?
So I didn't think of them as secrets. So when the word secret entered my lexicon was when I was writing my query letter to find my agent. But what I did, the way that I thought of each of their storylines were turning points. And so my question was, what is a turning point in each of these characters' lives where you see them completely change, where you see them almost, it's like a character break, where they go from being one way to being something completely different. So they're warm and inviting to cold and pessimistic, or whatever the case may be. And pulling from my life and the life of my friends, I always feel like that those turning points for Black women happen around who you are partnered with, married or not, and whether or not you choose to mother. Like, I feel like those are like two of the biggest turning points in our lives. And so I wanted to really play with that and show what the impact of a good partner or a bad partner, or a good co-parent or a bad co-parent, or having children or not, or deciding not to have children, or doing it begrudgingly. And what does that look like? How do they not only survive on the other side of it? So like for some of them, it's because of the choices that they've made. For others, it's because something has happened to them that those are those inciting moments, those turning points in their lives. So what do their lives look like on the other side of that moment? How, not just how do they survive, how do they thrive? Are they resilient? How do they raise children? Do they stay at home? Do they move away? What do they cling to? What do they run from? And so that's what I was exploring. But the word secret did not enter my mind until I had to write that query letter. And I was like, oh, it's about secrets.
It's such a common engine, I think, for multi-generational books, right? That that back there along the line somewhere, there is some story that is going to drive, or that is driving the generations forward or holding them back, right? And that, I'm always interested in narrative engines, things that drive books, and like I said, if anybody's ever stuck, I always say, give somebody a secret and let it eat at them, and then follow that thread and see where it takes you, because there's a story there, right? There's no secrets are only as good as their consequence when they're gonna come rolling back in. Um, let's talk a little bit about the and this is a little interesting kind of comparing notes kind of thing. So we've got one book that here. So Nikesha, your book has, come out on a major press, and so you've had that experience. Jennifer, you've had both experiences. You've had books come on big presses. Your first novel, or first collection of stories, and then this book is on a small press. And so I think people are always sort of interested in how people are sort of how writers that are just publishing or published are finding the current state of the I'm sorry, of the publishing world. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. So how what are there things that have surprised you about either space, either the big five space or the independent press space?
I think that for me, because I think I mean, I'm having books on university presses, and then, I've on larger indies, and now my agent's trying to sell a novel to wherever, so to place on the list. So I've kind of had a lot of different types of experiences, but I think there's merit to almost every one, in a lot of different ways. So, with small presses, and this is coming on the university press, it's also a small press. There's a lot of hands-on sort of back and forth thing. There's I was allowed to kind of pick my cover. They gave me a couple of options and I was able to pick that. Whereas at my other press, they gave me two options and I could pick out of two, but it wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't as hands-on. So things like covers were something I noted. Um, when you're with a larger publication, you get all these people doing the stuff for you. You're like, ooh, okay, they'll do the marketing for me, the publicity. That's fun. Um, but then sometimes on small presses, they have people doing that, but then you put a lot of work into it yourself, which can be rewarding because you feel like you can do it. But at the same time, it is nice to have that group of people doing it for you too sometimes. So there's ups and downs to both. But I've had really good. I got lucky that I've worked with so many great editors, so each editor for each book I've had a pretty good experience with, and they've been, some have been more hands off, some have been really hands on. It really just depends on what on the press, but I've had a good time. So yeah.
I've had like a lot of different experiences. Like I started off self-publishing, so very, very indie. And then the book before this was a nonfiction book that came out on LSU Press that was something that the acquisitions editor came to me after seeing an essay I'd written. And so that was a very different experience. And then I also had like some imposter syndrome because I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, I'm not a historian. I was like, you want me to do what? But it happened and it came out. So that was very good. And then the big five, I've had a very, I guess, Cinderella kind of big five experience, at least in the beginning. But it's corporate publishing. And so with the Cinderella trappings come Cinderella expectations. And so I've been very, and also like, and I've said this a few times, but like, the environment and the socio-political climate that my book was sold in is not the environment or the socio-political climate that my book has come out in. So there's been a big difference from like the deal in 2023 to it being released in 2026, especially given the subject matter of the novel. And I'm glad it has gotten all of the support that has gotten from the publisher. They have put all of as much money behind me as I'm sure they know how, to send me on a pre-publication tour, to send me on an actual tour. I was able to choose my cover and make tweaks to it and say, like, it's not right yet. Like, can we go back to the drawing board until it was right? They have really been very, very supportive the entire step of the way. But corporate publishing is about the bottom line and the dollar. And I'm seeing that really heavily now, in terms of like what the expectations are, which have not been clearly communicated. But there are expectations there. And so the pressure to perform and to meet that, whatever that expectation is that's written on a P&L sheet somewhere that they're not showing me, is real. And then that is also, it could, I don't know if it will have any bearing on whether or not what's to come after this, because I didn't have a 2-book deal. It was just for the 1 book, with the right of refusal. Also, yeah, it's a lot happening over here.
Yeah. You had a long ramp,
Yeah,
because I think I remember that just after what year were you a fellow?
23.
2023.
Yeah,
So
the
you
same
already
year
knew
as
the book
old.
was coming then. And so, you had like a 3-year ramp here to from contract to release. Was that intentional on your part, or was that the sort of the publisher's idea? I'm just curious about.
That was it got pushed back. So we were supposed to release in 25, and we had done 2 rounds of edits. I did the first 2 rounds of edits were complete by like January of 24. But because of the size of my advance, more people had got to have opinions on the content and the text of the manuscript. And so the head of marketing read it, and the SVP of Simon and Schuster, whatever, also read the novel after those first 2 rounds of edits, and they had thoughts and suggestions.
Thoughts, yes.
And so then my editor felt a way about those thoughts and suggestions. So I didn't get the feedback until May.
Wow.
Yeah, like I finished my round in January. My agent and I thought, okay, we're good to go. When is the book going into production? And I think my editor got the notes in March. She didn't give them to me until like May 1st. I was very distraught. But I ended up turning them around in like 3 weeks. I got them to her by Memorial Day, because what you're not going to do is ruin my summer. And so I got her the edits back by May, like by Memorial Day. And then I didn't hear anything until July. And she was like, oh, one more thing. I think you can cut this chapter and just take scenes from this chapter and put it in this other chapter. And I had plans the next day. And so I did those edits in like 4 hours and sent them back and texted her. I said, hey, it's back in your inbox. I'm done. And that was the last thing. That was the last thing I did. And so then the book didn't go into production until August. And so we were supposed to come out in 25, but they wanted to make sure that we had a year of promotion and publicity. So then it was pushed back. Instead of doing like May or August of 25, they ended up doing January of 26.
I think that's another big difference between a small press and a large press. And I think Jennifer would agree with this, is that there's a lot of what do you call it? Oh, just a lot of other hands in the pot, and that everybody wants to get their hands in and think about this or do that. And it can be crazy making.
A
So
lot of
you trade
hands.
off one thing for another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just like a funny note from my friend Liz here, which is that poets don't have to worry about any of this kind of stuff. It's like, you put the poems together, you send them off, and maybe they bind them, maybe they don't.
No, nobody has to set up the 12-month pre-publication tour. Trust me.
And I would say in all these cases, and for everybody there, and then in the boxes who is anticipating or looking forward to this next phase in their career when the books happen, that this is just the reality is that we, the writers, have to get out there and make them happen. That's, it doesn't matter whether it's a huge press or a small press. It's up to us to, and I know you've both done a lot of publicity and pre-publicity and just kind of pushing them out the best you can, and sometimes working with the publicist, sometimes just grinding it away on your own. And it's another whole part of the business. We've got a minute or two left, and if there are any other questions out there from folks who want to jump in, Camille has a question.
I actually just have to jump in because Nikesha, I had emailed you and I was hoping you'd come to San Diego at some time, but I'm like, at least I have a chance to visit with you this way. I got my book. Oh, I don't have my wait, wrong thing. I got my book. Oh, you can't see it. But if virtual signing were possible, I would totally love that. But what struck me so much is the sense of suspense that's inside of the story, as much as there's a kind of intimacy with the characters. And I wondered, is that something that kind of came more to the fore as you were in the editing process, where you're really it actually becomes a page turner, which was so surprising, right? I mean, I think some ways we might not think a historical novel tends to do that, but at the same time I was invested in the characters, I really was also like wondering what was going to happen next. So wondered when that arose for you in the process.
I, it was intentional to put the enslaved ancestor at the very end. And the reason I did that and I didn't combine her story with any of the other daughters is because while I generally don't think about the reader when I'm writing, when I realized I was going to do this deep generational story and I was going to deal with slavery, I immediately thought about how some readers are like, oh, I don't want another slave story, right? And so I was like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this one time and one time only, and it's at the end. And for anyone who reads the book who does not want to deal with that particular portion, they could read parts 1, 2, and 3 and the epilogue and still have a full complete story without going through that drama. So that was part of the reason there. The other thing though was because I was putting this together, the story in a way that was not linear, the way that I was putting the daughters together was by experience. So we start with Tatiana's birthday, and then the next chapter is Emma never had a birthday. So like they have the same experience. They also have the same question. Emma wanted to know who her mother was. Tatiana wanted to know who her father was. The women that were messing with the wrong man. Let's put their stories together. So that's Nadia and Juby. The women that learned how to do hair when no one else in the family could. Let's put their stories together, and really trying to build their arcs around each other to show the parallels in their lives from what they're not dealing with and what they're not talking about. And so then that is how the sections came. Like part 1 is all the questions that you meet all of them, and their questions, they all have questions about something in their family. And then when you get to part 2, now we got all the answers and you still don't have the full story. So then what does the aftermath of their lives look like after you have answered the question, you revealed the secrets? How do you move on from that? And so you see that in the different pieces, so that once you get used to the structure and it being nonlinear, and I'm jumping through voices and you don't know whose perspective you're in at first, by the time you get to parts 2 and beyond, you know who these women are and you know what's coming, and you're trying to figure out what's to come next. And I think it happened organically. Like I can't take a whole lot of credit for, like, I was so very intentional about it. Like I did know I wanted to put them together thematically, and I knew I wanted to have the enslaved ancestor at the end, and everything else is kind of the kismet of creativity.
Thanks. I just have to throw in here one of the most interesting lessons I learned from a colleague at Warren Wilson. The colleague was Michael Martone, who once gave a brilliant class where he demonstrated that actually the idea of linearity is artifice. It actually doesn't, it's not a real thing. And what he did was he actually wrote an essay that was, that kind of followed through talking about linearity. And then he just had people sort of randomly ask him, call out a number, I'll read that part next. And the whole thing sort of cohered. Now, there was a little bit of trick behind doing that, but I think what you just said, Nikesha, is really fascinating. And it has to do with the fact that There are all kinds of ways that novels unify themselves, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes it's thematically, sometimes it's by rhyming or repetition of ideas or whatever. We are just a little past our time, and I want to honor everybody's time late in the evening in the East, and then time for dinner for folks out on the West Coast. And so let's all give a big round of applause and throw some of those lovely hearts up on the screen for uh, Jennifer Maritza McCauley and Nikesha Elise Williams. Thank you both for being here, and thanks to all of the Kimbilio family that turned out tonight to be a part of this. Love from everybody, and